However, the whole mountain was on red alert on this day. From every Knight of Light to Pope Hayes himself, everyone was watching the scene unfolding in the sky. Everyone on the mountain knew the battle on this day would determine the Light Church's continuity. Should they win, they would continue to reign over Light Continent. But should they lose, they would be completely wiped out. Everything hinged on the outcome. Suppress him, Angel's battle formation. A great force crushed down toward Meng Lei, sweeping toward him like torrential waves. The void was instantly locked down with Meng Lei in the very center. That's a pretty good containment tactic. It's likely that you'll be able to suppress most lesser deities out there. What a shame that it's useless against me. Meng Lei formed a sword with his fingers and lightly drew a line across the air that had been locked down. A formless sword glint shot forth and instantly cleaved against the air that had solidified. Slash! The void was instantly cleaved into two. The suppression force triggered by Angel Battle Formation also dissolved in this instant, causing the 9 true gods' expressions to change dramatically. He has destroyed Angel Battle Formation just like that? Do you think you can trap me when I'm the master of this existential plane? How childish! An invisible spear manifested from power of existential plane shot out forcefully with a flick of Meng Lei's fingers and pierced right through one of the true god's head. Ugh! Thunderstruck, the true god froze up at once. A bloody hole formed in between his brows, and then golden divine blood began to trickle from the wound. I've died just like that. Disbelief was written all over the true god's countenance. He was one of the church's ascetic cultivators. During the last 50,000 years, he had painstakingly and diligently cultivated. At last, he broke free of the shackles and stepped into the realm of true gods 28,760 years ago and became one of the few true gods that had broken through by their own efforts in the church. Yet he was actually going to die. His years of painstaking cultivation would go up in smoke. He couldn't accept it. He couldn't. Lord Conant. The Light Church masses' expressions couldn't help but change greatly as shock and disbelief filled them. That was Lord Conant, one of the church's strongest ascetic cultivators. Yet he had died just like that? Why is this happening? How did Lord Conant die? None of them could accept such an outcome. Sir, that's exactly the kind of attack he had used. The Holy Maiden of Light had an awful look on her face. She said, "It's neither a physical nor a power of divinity attack. Nor is it a divine spirit attack, yet its power is on the level of a true god. It's extremely bizarre." Pope Hayes nodded slightly, his brows drawing together into a frown. Meng Lei was stronger than he had expected. Things would be tough for them today. Has Conant died just like that? The remaining 8 true gods looked fearful. As they gazed at Meng Lei, their eyes were full of shock, horror, and wariness. The angel battle formation jointly formed by the 9 of them was capable of trapping the vast majority of lesser deities. But Meng Lei, he had actually destroyed their angel battle formation and killed Conant so casually. How strong must he be? A pinnacle-level lesser deity. He's definitely a pinnacle-level lesser deity. The 8 true gods exchanged looks with one another, communicating swiftly with one another via their divine cognition. Everyone, the other party is too powerful. His strength far surpasses what we had expected. What should we do? There's only that one move left if we hope to defeat him. Otherwise, we won't be his match at all. That move? Is there no other way? Yes. Do we absolutely have to use that move? Unless we flee, that move is the only one we can use. Otherwise, we won't be a match for him at all. Flee. One must admit that thoughts of fleeing had indeed occurred to the few true gods. They were true gods. As long as they focused solely on fleeing, they would definitely be able to get away. But the problem was, if they fled, then what about the church? The Light Church had groomed them ever since they were young. The church was their origin. Even if they must die or be killed, they couldn't just abandon the church and make a getaway on their own. 1 down, 8 to go. Meng Lei gazed at the remaining 8 true gods and said, "I will kill all of you, flatten the holy mountain of light, and completely erase the Light Church now. All of you, are you ready?" The 8 true gods shuddered the moment the words left his mouth. Looks of hesitation and internal struggle flashed across their eyes. Unless they absolutely had to, they really didn't want to resort to that move. The first one, Meng Lei locked on to one of the true gods and slowly reached out his right index finger. He said, "I pick you." Damn! The true god's expression changed drastically, and he instinctively wanted to dodge. To his horror, however, he discovered in this instant that he actually couldn't move. Damn! Move! Hurry, MOV! He bellowed madly inwardly. However, he felt an intense, piercing pain in the middle of his brows at this moment. It instantly swept through his nerves and his brain, then he stiffened and crashed straight onto the ground. His eyes were widened big and round. Evidently, he hadn't died in peace. The second one, Meng Lei turned to the remaining 7 true gods. His gaze swept to and fro among them, frightening the 7 true gods out of their wits. 6 of them were still caught in their internal struggles and hesitating, but one of them actually began to flee into the distance without even so much as a look behind him. He moved extremely swiftly, crossing 10 miles in a breath. In the blink of an eye, he had vanished into the horizon. The 6 remaining true gods' eyes widened big and round as they stared in stunned silence at the other true god's back. Torrential waves churned in their hearts. They really felt like breaking into expletives at this moment. Jarpet! That bastard! He's actually fled. He's actually abandoned his faith and deserted the Light Church and chickened out. A disgrace. He's a disgrace to the church. Pope Hayes had an extremely dark and sinister look on his face. Jarpet had always claimed that he wouldn't hesitate to do anything and would go through the hardest of trials for the church. Yet now, in the face of danger, he had actually fled so resolutely. This was an utter embarrassment to the church. Someone has actually fled? Well, Amos also looked taken aback. He said, "Every one of those quacks from the Light Church has always adopted an attitude as if they were full of compassion and pity for mankind, and acted as if they would sacrifice themselves for their faith anytime. I'd never have thought that they would actually make a run for it the moment trouble actually knocks on their door. What a jaw-dropping surprise." A smiling Meng Lei shook his head at Ol Amos' comment. Then he said, "It's already remarkable that only one of them has fled. After all, which among those that could cultivate all the way to become a true god isn't a person of determination and strong will? How would they possibly truly worship someone else?" "That's true." Ol Amos agreed with his statement. He said, "Be it half-deities or true gods, they are usually all selfish people that can bring themselves to abandon anything during moments of life and death. The 6 of you are the only ones left now," said Meng Lei as he turned to the 6 remaining true gods. The 6 true gods shuddered all over upon noticing Meng Lei's gaze. Then, they did something shocking. They took off at once without even so much as a look behind them and disappeared into the far horizon in the blink of an eye. Meng Lei, Ol Amos, the Light Church masses. All of them ran away. Ol President. Meng Lei found this hilarious. We were wrong. Their faith in the goddess of light isn't that pious after all. Yeah, we were wrong. Ol Amos didn't know what to say anymore. As expected, humans are selfish. And the more powerful and the higher of a status a deity is, the more selfish they usually are, too. Exactly. Meng Lei nodded slightly. Then he turned to Pope Hayes and said, "Your Holiness, the talents that the Light Church has groomed sure are astonishing. Bastards. Those 7 selfish and mercenary bastards. They are all sinners. Sinners." Pope Hayes could no longer maintain his compassionate and merciful attitude. His whole face had become incredibly distorted, and even his eyes were red. They've abandoned their faith and betrayed our Lord, as well the Church. They are even more abominable and deserve death even more than those wicked heretics. What do we do now, sir? The Holy Maiden of Light also had an icy look on her face. She had never thought that things would reach such a point. 2 true gods had fallen in battle while the remaining 7 had fled from battle and abandoned them. The Light Church had landed itself into an incredibly embarrassing and perilous situation. We can only risk our lives and fight. Pope Hayes instructed, Activate the light shield. Nothing must happen to the Shrine of Light. Yes, sir. The Holy Maiden of Light nodded slightly and relayed his order. Buzz. A gentle milky white glow formed around the Shrine of Light before swiftly spreading and turning into a milky white shield that isolated the whole Shrine of Light from the outside world. The light shield is formed from power of faith that the Shrine of Light has accumulated over the years. It can endure several attacks from an intermediate deity. Pope Hayes let out a sigh of relief as he gazed at the light shield enveloping the Shrine of Light. He said, "With the light shield, the Shrine of Light should be safe and secure. Now I can battle with peace of mind." "Sir, you?" A huge jolt went through the Holy Maiden of Light. "Altacia, blasphemy toward our Lord's faith cannot be condoned. The Light Church will not stand for anyone challenging its authority. Keep this firmly in mind, and you'll become a qualified pope." Pope Hayes gave Altacia a deep and meaningful look. Then, he took off the Pope's hat he was wearing and personally placed it atop the Holy Maiden of Light's head. "Sir, no. Don't." The Holy Maiden of Light shook her head vehemently, choking up as tears welled up in her eyes. "Altacia, do not grieve for me. It is my utmost honor to be able to sacrifice myself for our Lord." Then, Pope Hayes gave her a kind and benevolent smile and said, "Besides, your teacher won't die so easily." Then Pope Hayes slowly rose into the air. Without the Pope's hat restraining his hair, his head of white hair now fluttered in the breeze. His snowy white robes were clean and spotless. Flames of fury burned within his small and skinny frame like a volcano that might erupt any moment. "Your Holiness, you're finally out." Meng Lei looked at the Pope of Light with a smile. He said, "You're very brave. I'm even somewhat admiring you now. For our Lord's glory, what is there to fear about death?" Pope Hayes' voice turned cold and emotionless as he said, "Your Holiness, leave at once, and I'll take it that nothing had ever happened. Otherwise, Your Holiness, from start to finish, there's something you actually still haven't understood." Meng Lei flicked his fingers and said with a shake of his head, "This existential plane belongs to me. I will not permit other types of religious faith to exist here. Do you understand? Let's fight." Torrential power of divinity gushed into Pope Hayes' pastoral staff as he brandished it. His voice thundered in the sky. "By our Lord's decree, let there be light." Buzz. Dazzling golden divine light spilled from the sky, melting the void inch by inch and creating pitch-black fissures everywhere it passed through. The terrifying divine light had actually obliterated even the dimension itself. Boom! Divine light instantly enveloped Meng Lei. His Holiness is a lesser deity and the top expert in Light Continent. With him around, that evil deity is doomed. Your Holiness, you must kill that evil deity. Everyone in the Light Church went into a frenzy the moment Pope Hayes launched his attack. Their eyes, full of anticipation, shone brightly and keenly as they watched the Pope in the sky. "Sir, you'll definitely beat him. Definitely." The Holy Maiden of Light's expression was filled with hope, too. Now that things had come to such a pass, the Light Church could be said to have revealed all of its trump cards. If even the Pope couldn't defeat Meng Lei, then only one outcome awaited the Light Church: annihilation. Therefore, everyone had pinned all their hopes on Pope Hayes. At the same time, while all these happened, the 7 true gods that had previously fled actually hadn't completely left yet. After fleeing for a distance that they felt was safe enough, they stopped to observe the battleground from a far distance. All of them wanted to know how the battle today would conclude and who the victor would be. Boom! Golden divine light shone down from above, instantly shrouding Meng Lei within. Fearsome power capable of melting things assaulted him and began to furiously dissolve his body. Meng Lei's clothes had been fully dissolved in the blink of an eye, revealing his long, slender, and well-built physique, including his shaft. "As long as you're a lesser deity, you'll definitely perish under my attacks." Pope Hayes watched Meng Lei closely. He was fairly confident in his abilities. After all, he was a pinnacle-level lesser deity. On top of that, his By Our Lord's Decree secret arts even had its origins from the celestial realm. It was 10 times more powerful than pure light elemental divine techniques. How could lesser deities possibly withstand attacks like that? However, 1 second passed, 3 seconds passed, 10 seconds passed, half a minute passed, yet Meng Lei remained well and intact. Aside from his clothes that had dissolved, his divine body showed no signs of dissolving at all. In fact, every strand of body hair was standing tall and proud. So, that's what your attack is like, Your Holiness? Netherworld divine fire rose around him and covered his vital parts. Meng Lei looked at Pope Hayes and said dispassionately, "Isn't it a little too weak? It can't even count as a tickle. Why is this happening?" Pope Hayes was filled with disbelief. He exclaimed, "My divine technique attacks are capable of inflicting grievous wounds on lesser deities. You can't possibly be unaffected at all." "Absolutely not. Your Holiness, you might be mistaken about something." Meng Lei shook his head. "I've never said that I'm a lesser deity." "Not a lesser deity? Could you be?" Pope Hayes' expression changed drastically. Meng Lei teleported right in front of him at this moment and dealt a light palm strike against his chest. Ugh! Pope Hayes coughed up blood and fell backward, crashing violently against the milky white light shield. "Sir! Your Holiness!" The expressions of everyone from the Light Church changed greatly as they stared at the sight in disbelief. A single move. He had defeated the Pope with just a single move. Just how frighteningly strong was he? An intermediate deity. He must be an intermediate deity. Fear and horror surfaced in the Holy Maiden of Light's eyes as she murmured, "O noble Lord, he's actually an intermediate deity. How can he be an intermediate deity?" Intermediate deities were absolute, invincible existences on the Heaven's Vault continent existential plane. There was no way they could defeat an intermediate deity even if they were to amass all of the Light Church's power. The gap in strength was too great. A miscalculation. "I've made a miscalculation." An unsteady Pope Hayes flew back into the air. There was blood at the corners of his lips. He said, "I didn't expect Your Holiness to be an intermediate deity. I was blind. It's not too late to become aware of it now." Meng Lei flicked his fingers and said dispassionately, "Your Holiness, I admire your strength and courage very much. I'll give you a chance to live. Submit to me and become the Meng Lei Holy Cult's Pope." "I'm afraid I'll have to let you down, Your Holiness." Pope Hayes coughed up a mouthful of blood and said, "As our Lord's servant, I will only worship our noble Lord for all of my life. It's impossible for me to change my faith to worship someone else." What a real shame. Meng Lei was rather regretful. "In that case, sorry about this." Meng Lei slowly raised a finger. Netherworld divine fire burst forth from his fingertip, and a black spear aimed from a distance at Pope Hayes quietly formed. Netherworld divine fire. Pope Hayes' pupils constricted. He could sense great danger approaching. He hastily wielded the pastoral staff in his hand and commanded, "By our Lord's decree, let there be light." Whoosh! Surging golden divine light gushed from the pastoral staff, forming a golden wall in front of him as he prepared to block Meng Lei's attack. "This move again? Looks like you've exhausted all your abilities, Your Holiness." The black spear formed from Netherworld divine fire shot out like a piercing arrow with a casual wave from Meng Lei and instantly appeared right in front of the golden wall. Splurt! It pierced through the golden wall with barely any obstruction before, subsequently piercing through Pope Hayes' chest and coming out from the other side. Ugh! Blood spurted from Pope Hayes' mouth. He stared at the black hole in his chest in stunned silence, all his fighting spirit and determination turning into despair and a sense of powerlessness at this moment. "It's too great. The gap between the two of us is simply too great." Pope Hayes let out a resigned laugh and said, "Now that things have reached such a pass, I can only resort to that." Then, he looked at Meng Lei and then at the Shrine of Light and the Light Church masses shrouded by the light shield. He let out a hoarse shout, "The Light Church lives on. Our Lord's brilliance will shine upon the world for all of eternity." Immolate! Dazzling flames of light suddenly burst forth from all over him. Then, the originally holy and sacred flames of light began to burn Pope Hayes furiously. His life force began to wane at a terrifying speed, like water rapidly flowing out of a bottomless bucket. This is an immolation spell. Well, Amos' expression changed drastically at the sight. He shouted, "Meng Lei, stop him. He's immolating. He's summoning the angels." Things would become troublesome once the angels descend. Immolating? Summoning the angels. Meng Lei raised an eyebrow. He wasn't that surprised, though. Well, Amos had already told him that the Light Church was capable of summoning angels from the celestial realm. However, the move was highly reminiscent of the Seven Injuries Fist one. If one wished to summon beings, then they must first offer sacrifices. Immolation would burn away almost all of the sacrifice's life essence and the greater half of their divine spirit. In less severe cases, they would suffer a great loss of combat prowess, while in serious cases they might lose their lives. Immolation could be said to be an act that was close to going down together with the enemy. It was precisely because the price they had to pay for immolation was too great that the seven true gods from earlier would rather flee. The stronger the sacrifice is, the more powerful the summoned angel would be. Well, Amos shouted in a deep voice. Pope Hayes is a lesser deity, so the angel that he'll summon in return for burning his divine body and divine spirit would definitely be incredibly fearsome. Meng Lei shook his head lightly and said with a smile, "I've not seen a real angel yet, OL President. Just as well that I take this opportunity to take a good look." Take a good look? Amos was rather incensed. He said, "This is a matter of grave importance that concerns your life, yet you're saying that you want to take a good look? What if the angel that he summons is stronger than you? It'll be fine. Don't worry. No one can be stronger than me in this existential plane." Buzz. The Pope's divine body began to visibly wane and shrivel up as the immolation continued. His originally strong and powerful divine spirit also weakened further and further. At last, by the final stages of the immolation process, Pope Hayes had completely become an old man that was all skin and bone and with one foot in the grave. A golden dimensional gate had also appeared above him. Who has summoned me? 1. The Kong Tong Sek's signature move in Louis Cha's martial novels. It allows the user to inflict severe internal injuries on an opponent at the cost of long-term damage to the user's internal organs as the user progresses from one stage to the next. A voice full of dignified might rang, and a dazzling golden beam of light fell from the dimensional gate above the Pope's head. Boom! An extremely tyrannical aura spread out from the golden light beam, like fierce golden tidal waves sweeping in all directions. Thud! Thud! The Knights of Light on the holy mountain of light were pressed uncontrollably on the ground. They could not raise their heads at all as they trembled in extreme horror. Even the Holy Maiden of Light and other high figureheads, half-deities who were shrouded in a light shield, felt suffocated and alarmed. Such a terrifying aura. It's definitely over the level of lesser deity. It was certain that our Pope could summon such a powerful celestial angel. The Light Church's half-deities were agitated as if they had already witnessed the scene of Meng Lei being defeated in a dominating fashion, even him getting killed. The entire place went into an uproar as a lofty and majestic figure appeared out of the fading golden beams. The head was adorned with a golden halo, its hands held onto a golden spear, both feet were naked, and 3 pairs of golden feathered wings grew on the back. 6-winged angel. It's comparable to an intermediate deity. A 6-winged angel. We are saved. The Light Church is saved. Look, we are saved. Everyone was thrown in a frenzied joy. The Holy Maiden of Light was equally agitated. As a part of the Church, how could she not know the various levels and combat prowess of angels? Angels were classified into 3 tiers. 4-winged low-order angels, equivalent to a lesser deity. 6-winged middle-order angels, equivalent to an intermediate deity. 8-winged high-order angels, equivalent to a higher deity. Every tier was split into 3 classes. Among them, the 3 classes of the middle-order angels were powers, virtues, dominions. Each class was stronger than the class before, one mightier than the other. The angel that descended upon this time had 6 wings, a proper intermediate deity. How powerful was an intermediate deity like that? Wonder which class among the middle-order angels this angel is. If it is dominions, we'll surely win today's battle. The holy maiden of light thought with an agitated gaze, her eyes full of hope and expectations. Who has summoned me? The six-winged angel lowered his head and looked at the skeletal Pope Hayes. His voice was extremely majestic. Your Grace, it was I who summoned you. Pope Hayes was on his dying breath, but his eyes were sparkling as he pointed at Meng Lei and said, Your Grace, I'm the Light Church's Pope in this existential plane, and an evil blasphemer has emerged here. He's aiming to destroy our Light Church and cut off our Lord's faith. I hope that your Grace will mete out divine punishment and eliminate such a heretic to protect our church. Having said these words, Pope Hayes dropped to the floor as if he had consumed every bit of strength left in him. If not for his chest movements, people would have thought that he died already. Blasphemer! The six-winged angel looked at Meng Lei with a sharp glint bursting forth from his eyes. Anyone who dares to blaspheme my lord deserves death. Lorenzo Fillmore, the virtue angel, hereby sentence you to death. The mighty voice was still reverberating in the air as the spear in the six-winged angel's hands had already reached Meng Lei's forehead. Whoosh! The spear hit an afterimage. Meng Lei appeared strangely a few meters away and looked at the six-winged angel with great interest. He could sense that this virtue angel was not a divinity projection but a true body that had descended. It was unexpected. Dodola, isn't it that deities could not descend upon low-end existential planes? Why could the six-winged angel do so in Light Continent? Nothing is absolute. There are loopholes within the rules of heaven and earth. Dodola explained simply. Indeed, under normal circumstances, deities could not descend upon low-end existential planes. However, arcane immolation spells, like the one that the Light Church used here, can temporarily create a dimensional gate and summon deities from the void. Of course, this kind of immolation spell comes under race secret arts, so most deities would not know of it. There are only a few deities who could use it across the entire void. I see. Meng Lei nodded slightly. Such agility. After missing his strike, the six-winged angel was slightly surprised. You can actually dodge my attack, so it seems you're not an ordinary true god. Still, facing me, any kind of speed will be futile. Angel's domain. Buzz. A golden ripple spread around and shrouded Meng Lei's area, imprisoning the space along with Meng Lei in his spot. Dealing with such a lowly deity, a god's domain will be enough. The six-winged angel took a step forward, and his spear was already pointed at Meng Lei's forehead. Blasphemer! The moment when you desecrated my lord, your fate was sealed. Go to hell. The spearhead only needed to be thrust forward, and it would pierce right through Meng Lei's forehead. However, Lorenzo came to realize that he couldn't move as simple movements that could be done easily previously were now heavier than ever to the point of immobilization. What happened? Lorenzo could not believe it. He was an intermediate deity. It might not mean a lot among the rest of the angels, but descending in a low-end existential plane should make him unstoppable, right? How could he be immobilized? Is your divine body immobilized? Meng Lei smiled and gazed upon the six-winged angel. This is the power of existential plane? Lorenzo sensed the power that imprisoned him, and then his expression changed drastically. You've refined the heart of the existential planes and become this existential plane's master? You've guessed it right. Meng Lei smiled as he nodded. Oh, let me add that I'm an intermediate deity which is the same level as you. So, even without the power of existential plane, you god's domain can't do anything against me. As he spoke, Meng Lei stepped forward and appeared mysteriously in front of the six-winged angel and blasted a punch. Ugh! It was as if the six-winged angel's body was thunderstruck. His intestines were dislocated while blood shot out like an arrow from his abdomen. This power, indeed, an intermediate deity. Lorenzo's holy face turned pale, and he suddenly looked at Pope Hayes, his eyes filled with immense rage and hate. You damned idiotic fool! Are you blind? How could you summon me into an existential plane that has a master? Are you trying to get me killed? You foolish turd? Lorenzo was infuriated. Meng Lei was an intermediate deity that matched their levels already. Now he was also this existential plane's master. How was he possibly going to match Meng Lei? He was only an ordinary virtues angel, letting him face off against the existential plane's master, who was also an intermediate deity. Was this not an attempt to get him killed? The infuriating thing was that the foolish Pope had not even figured out Meng Lei's background properly and summoned him here rashly. This was pushing him into a pit of hell. Although his breath was faint, Pope Hayes was still barely alive. He wanted to stay alive until the battle was over and Meng Lei was defeated, which meant the continuation of the Light Church's rule. Hence, he was not dead as he paid close attention to Meng Lei's battle with the six-winged angel. When Meng Lei seemed trapped, he cheered internally as he thought, that was the power of the six-winged angel, stopping Meng Lei with just his god's domain. Yet, right now, in this very moment where he was being shouted at by Lorenzo, he was dumbfounded. Your Grace, you damned fool! The six-winged angel glared at the Pope furiously. Did you not know that he had already refined the heart of the existential planes and became the master of the existential plane? Master of the existential plane? Pope Hayes' expression changed immensely. The Light Church had been around for hundreds of thousands of years, and as the Pope, how would he not understand the meaning of the master of an existential plane? The master of an existential plane could utilize the entire power of the existential plane. It was no exaggeration that the master would be invincible in his own existential plane. Meng Lei was the master of this existential plane? You didn't even know if he was the master of the existential plane and summoned me carelessly? What a fool! The six-winged angel was incredibly furious, but now that it had come to this point, any scoldings would be pointless. Thus, he turned his head to look at Meng Lei. Sir, I might have unknowingly offended you previously, and I beg for your forgiveness. I'll leave immediately. With that said, he rose into the air and was about to return into the dimensional gate and leave the light continent. Hold it! Meng Lei opened his mouth. Who says that you can come and go at will? What do you treat this place as? What do you want? Lorenzo's pupils contracted as he stared at Meng Lei coldly, his eyes flickering with rage. I heard that you angels are natural slaves and lackeys of the goddess of light. You are also extremely skilled in the art of servicing, right? Meng Lei snapped his fingers. How dare you? Lorenzo's expression turned grim. Sir, do you know what you're saying? Oh, Meng Lei raised an eyebrow. You're desecrating our great goddess of light. Lorenzo barked fiercely. A lowly low-end existential plane master who dares to desecrate my lord. You've sinned. Sinned. Meng Lei sneered. If provoking the goddess of light means that I'm sinful, then I have cursed Hades, slept with the Grim Reaper, and even screwed around with the goddess of life. Does that mean that I've committed the most sinful crimes where I should be cut with 1,000 knives? You goddamned blasphemer. Lorenzo was shaking furiously. You're deeply mired in sin. Your crimes are mounting into the sky. You've committed heinous sins, and 1,000 deaths will not atone for your sins. Are you done yet? Meng Lei waved his hands impatiently. If you're done talking, I'll give you a chance to live if you hand over your divine spirit origin energy and submit to me. Submit? You're asking me to submit to you. The six-winged angel flew into a rage. I'm a part of the angel gods, a great servant of the goddess of light. I would rather die, fall upon hell eternally, become the devil that I hated the most than to submit to you. Not submitting? Then prepare to die. Meng Lei sneered coldly as black flames lit up in his hands. I guess I'll use the netherworld divine fire to burn your divine body and divine spirit so that your soul will be gone forever. Upon looking at the netherworld divine fire in Meng Lei's hands, Lorenzo even thought about dying for the first time in his entire life. He's the master of this existential plane and an intermediate deity. Now, he's also a divine netherworld phoenix? Just how did a monster like that emerge from a low-end existential plane? It's time, Your Grace. You should get going and report to hell early. Meng Lei teleported before Lorenzo instantly. However, he had not initiated his attack, and the previously passionate fervent angel was already kneeling before Meng Lei's feet. Don't burn me. I submit. Meng Lei, Oel Amos, Holy Maiden of Light, Pope Hayes, passed away. passed away. Was he really that lacking of a backbone? The Pope was almost driven mad with fury. Unable to catch his breath, he breathed his last. He could be said to be the Pope that had died in the weirdest way in the Light Church's tens of thousands of years of history. Just as stunned were the 7 true gods that had fled. Although they were very far away from the battleground, this bit of distance was nothing to them. The angel from the upper realm had surrendered. On top of that, he had surrendered without even putting up a fight. He's a great 6-winged virtue angel, yet he actually has no backbone at all? He's practically an embarrassment. The 7 true gods really wished they could give voice to their contempt toward him, but when they thought about themselves by association, they couldn't muster up any feelings of contempt at all. The angel from the upper realm had surrendered, but they had also fled. This was nothing more than just the pot calling the kettle black. They were no different from each other, so what right did they have to look down on him? However, they couldn't help but feel extremely thankful. That's right, thankful. The 7 true gods were thankful that they had chickened out and ran in the face of danger instead of stubbornly opposing Meng Lei like the Holy Maiden and the Pope, yet only to end up in such a state. The Light Church is finished. There's no longer any place for us in the Light Continent. Where should we go from now on? Release your divine spirit origin energy. Yes, sir. Lorenzo, the 6-winged angel, didn't dare to dally. He hurriedly handed over his divine spirit origin energy and allowed Meng Lei to refine it and take control of his life and death. Meng Lei asked dispassionately, "Your name is Lorenzo?" "Yes, sir. My name is Lorenzo Fillmore," replied the 6-winged angel respectfully. Meng Lei raised an eyebrow and asked, "Do the other angels also lack a backbone like you?" "Sir, this..." At once, Lorenzo flushed a crimson red as he stammered. He didn't know how he should respond to Meng Lei. "Never mind. Since you've submitted to me, then fulfill your duty to me properly. Should you dare so much as to harbor thoughts of betrayal, I'll destroy your divine spirit and let you die a terrible death." "Yes, yes." Satisfied with Lorenzo's response, Meng Lei then turned to the Holy Maiden of Light and the Light Church's higher management officers, who were still in the light shield. His gaze caused blood to drain from the Holy Maiden of Light and the others' faces right away. Every one of them lowered their heads in fear, too scared to meet Meng Lei's gaze. To them, Meng Lei was even scarier than a demon from hell and even more terrifying than a demon god. How did this happen? The Holy Maiden of Light was filled with grief and sorrow. Never would she have ever imagined that the great 6-winged angel that was mighty-looking and awe-inspiring one moment would immediately submit to Meng Lei the next. He completely didn't meet their expectations at all. What were they to do now? What should the Light Church do? Where should they go from now on? Meng Lei asked dispassionately, "Are you going to come out here on your own? Or do you want me to drag all of you out?" They didn't respond, however. The higher management officers were filled with fear and horror. Yet not a single one of them answered Meng Lei. It was hard to tell whether it was because they were too frightened to answer or they were pinning their hopes on the light shield. In any case, no one responded. "You just don't give up, do you?" Meng Lei shook his head lightly. Then, he formed a sword with his fingers and drew a slash across the air. Slash! An invisible sword glint appeared out of thin air and shot out, instantly cleaving against the light shield. A slashing sound rang out, and then the light shield that was capable of withstanding multiple attacks from an intermediate deity broke into 2 without warning. Then, it shattered with a boom and vanished without a trace. "The light shield has been broken so easily?" The Holy Maiden of Light gasped. She knew that Meng Lei was very strong, but she hadn't expected him to actually be that strong. How terrifying! In this instant, she suddenly somewhat understood why the angel had chosen submission. When faced against such a powerful entity like Meng Lei, was he supposed to choose death over submission? "It's your turn now." Meng Lei gazed at the Light Church's higher management officers and asked, "Which would you like? To live or to die?" Thud. Someone dropped onto their knees right away. "Yes, sir. I'm willing to submit. I beg only for you to give me a way out." "Good." Meng Lei nodded slightly. "What about the rest of you?" Thud. 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 With someone taking the initiative to submit first, the second one naturally also came. In a short few seconds, all 108 half-deities had gotten onto their knees. Only one person still remained standing, Altacia, the Holy Maiden of Light. Meng Lei looked at her and said, "They've all submitted. Why haven't you?" Altacia replied coldly, "I am the Light Church's Holy Maiden of Light. You may take my life, but don't even dream of forcing me to submit to you. I will never abandon my faith even if I die. Go to hell then." Meng Lei pointed at her casually. A bloody hole formed in between her brows right away, and she collapsed onto the ground. She had actually died on the spot. The sight badly frightened the 108 half-deities. They were filled with lingering fears at once. If they hadn't submitted, they would probably have ended up like the Holy Maiden. "Aren't you a little too heartless, kid? You actually killed her." Aves couldn't help but diss him. He said, "Why do you not possess any protective feelings for the fairer sex at all? Have you not awakened to your carnal desires yet? But that shouldn't be. To hell with your carnal desires." Meng Lei rolled his eyes. Then he said, "I'll give these Light Church half-deities and the Light Continent all to you, O.L. President." "Really?" Aves' eyes sparkled. "Really?" Meng Lei nodded. He said, "My business here is more or less finished, so it's about time I leave. Will you leave with me? Or are you going to continue staying here for the time being?" Aves found himself in a struggle at once. After being away from Heaven's Vault continent for over 2 years, he wanted to go back and take a look around, of course. He especially wanted to go back and visit his younger sister. But the problem was that the Light Church had only just been dissolved, and the Light Continent had only just come into his possession. There were so many half-deities that he needed to subdue. On top of that, there was the Light Continent itself, too. It was exactly the time for him to show his skill and shine. How would he possibly bear to leave? What a struggle. Meng Lei knew what Aves was thinking the moment he saw the troubled look on his face. Rendered somewhat speechless, he said, "O.L. President, your mindset has become somewhat inflexible. What's wrong?" Aves was puzzled. Meng Lei said, "Wouldn't everything be solved if you just build teleportation magic circles on the 2 continents? Wouldn't traveling between the continents become just a matter of seconds after that? Teleportation magic circles? Darn, why did that slip my mind?" Aves smacked his forehead with a look of annoyance on his face. "By the way, you're the master of this existential plane? The man himself. That's great." Aves was awfully excited. He said, "I'll leave the matter of building the teleportation magic circles to you. This shouldn't be a problem for you since you're the master of the existential plane. Right?" Had anyone else dared to order him about like that, Meng Lei would have given them a tight slap across the cheek a long time ago. With Aves, though, Meng Lei instead obediently did what he was told. Of course, building teleportation magic circles was indeed a very simple task for him. He took only 5 minutes to build the teleportation magic circles connecting the 2 continents. An excited Aves then gave it a test run and went back and forth between the 2 continents. True enough, it was indeed very convenient. Aves couldn't help but marvel. "You built them so quickly." As expected, the master of the existential plane is indeed very powerful. Of course, Meng Lei was terribly smug. At that moment, Lorenzo, the 6-winged angel, suddenly spoke up. He said, "The summoning duration is up, Master. I have to leave soon. Do you have any orders for me?" Meng Lei replied, "Just one. Do your best to collect things like divinity crystals, laws of nature origin crystals, and gold coins. The more, the merrier. Get it?" "Yes, Master," Lorenzo answered respectfully as he undertook the task. "Go." Meng Lei waved. "Take care, Master." Lorenzo bowed slightly. Then he transformed into a golden ray of light and shot into the dimensional gate. Meng Lei closed his eyes and began to carefully trace the divine spirit mark that he'd left on Lorenzo. Then he detected the presence of an enormous existential plane, the Light Divine Realm. That's right, the Light Divine Realm. As a powerful godly clan that was in no way inferior to the Titan gods, traces of the angel gods could be found all over the vast universe. Be it the celestial realm, which was one of the 2 most supreme existential planes, the 10 major divine realms, or other low-end existential planes. Traces of the angel gods could be found in all of them. And evidently Lorenzo, the six-winged virtue angel, was an angel from the light divine realm. It's time I leave, but before I do, Meng Lei turned to Ol Amos. Do you want to take a tour around the Light Church's treasury? Ol President. A tour around the Light Church's treasury? Ol Amos' eyes lit up, but he shook his head shortly after. He said, "Never mind, this old man is already content with what he has now. I don't really care that much about mere worldly possessions anymore. Don't you regret it?" A smiling Meng Lei teased jokingly before vanishing. "You've already given me a lot, brat. It'd be too greedy of me if I hanker after the Light Church's treasury, too." Ol Amos shook his head. Then, he turned to the Light Church's higher management officers and said, "The Light Church has been annihilated. From today onward, all of you will become the Kroc Holy Sect's higher management officers instead. Any objections?" "As you wish, sir." "Great." Ol Amos was highly satisfied with their attitudes. After all, these were 108 half-deities. Just how terrifying a force were they? They would become his best tools for unifying the Light Continent and spreading his faith. "Listen up. This is my first order. Destroy all the Goddess of Light statues in the Light Continent and replace them with the great God Kroc's statues. Hills of laws of nature origin crystals, heaps and heaps of elemental crystals and laws of nature fragments, as well as innumerable magic materials and magic devices. The laws of nature origin crystals went straight into the system while he collected the elemental crystals and magic crystals, as well as the Saint Domain magic devices and half-divine weapons, and stored them away. An awfully jubilant Meng Lei collected them all before coming to the area where special items were stored at last. Largely similar to the Dragon God Empire's special items and the Titan Empire's treasuries, the ones here were also a trove of weird and wonderful things. True God remains, demon god hearts, fascinating ores, true god-level divine weapons. There was a dazzling array of items that came in all kinds and variations. The system's voice rang out at this point. "Ding! Dropped item detected. Will you pick it up?" "Yes, pick it up." "Ding! Pickup successful. You have obtained the four-winged angel bloodline. Will you assimilate it?" "No, don't assimilate it." "Ding! Dropped item detected. Will you pick it up?" "Yes, pick it up." "Ding! Pickup successful. You have obtained the ancient tree of life bloodline. Will you assimilate it?" "The ancient tree of life bloodline? What kind of bloodline is that?" Meng Lei couldn't help but shift his gaze to the item currently in front of him. It was an ordinary-looking piece of wood that was over a meter long and about the thickness of an adult's arm. "This is a branch of the ancient tree of life? The ancient tree of life? What kind of tree is that?" Meng Lei reached out to pick up the piece of wood to take a closer look, but he discovered that it was incredibly heavy to his astonishment. Even holding it was rather strenuous for him. "It's so heavy." Meng Lei was astonished. Just how terrifyingly strong must he be when his body was comparable to an intermediate deity's? Even grabbing a large mountain was a cinch for him, let alone a piece of wood shorter than 2 meters. What kind of botanical lifeform's remains is this? Exactly? To think a single branch is this heavy. Meng Lei promptly consulted Dodola. Dodola took a casual glance at the branch, and then it said dryly, "Do you have to ask me about something like that, too? Isn't that just a freaking normal piece of wood?" "Take a close look at it, Dodola," Meng Lei said. "This piece of wood is shockingly heavy. Even I find it somewhat strenuous to hold it at my current level of strength. It's definitely no ordinary dried branch." "Eh?" Dodola was slightly taken aback. Couldn't help but look at the piece of wood again. As it did, its eyes gradually widened until, at last, it gasped. "Oh my goodness! This is a branch from the ancient tree of life. Where did you get this from?" "From the Light Church's treasury." Meng Lei quickly asked, "What kind of plant is the ancient tree of life? Does it have anything to do with the tree of vitality?" "Of course it does." Dodola nodded lightly. "The vast universe has birthed many interesting and fascinating life forms. With animals around, plants would also exist. Among them, The most well-known botanical lifeforms have to be the 5 primeval divine trees. It's said that they were born in the Genesis continent and are very, very old and ancient. The 5 primeval divine trees. Meng Lei gasped. Which 5 trees are they? The mother tree of earth, the deep-sea coral willow, the Fusang One divine tree, the ancient tree of life, and the golden apple tree. Dodola explained. Among them, the ancient tree of life lives in the forest divine realm and is the oldest, tallest and biggest, and most majestic life form there. The fairy goddess had propagated the famous tree of vitality using a branch from the ancient tree of life itself. I see. Meng Lei took a breath. Then he remarked incredulously, what must the actual ancient tree of life look like when just its branch alone is already this heavy? It's huge. Unimaginably huge. A smiling Dodola said, when you leave Heaven's Vault continent someday, you can head to the forest divine realm and take a look. It'll definitely astound you. That day will come for sure. Then Meng Lei left the Tower of Time. System. Assimilate the ancient tree of life bloodline. Whoosh! A green deluge containing surging life force suddenly gushed out of Meng Lei's brain and instantly spread throughout his body. It flowed through his limbs and integrated itself into his organs. All the cells in Meng Lei's body gradually turned green, which in turn also caused his flesh, blood, bones, internal organs, and skin to turn green. It looked as if Meng Lei was going to turn into a Namek one. How amazing! I actually don't feel any pain at all while assimilating the ancient tree of life bloodline. This is a groundbreaking first. Indeed, he had assimilated many different bloodlines ever since the very first time he tried assimilating one, the fire dragon bloodline, and every single time, intense pain had accompanied the process, causing him to suffer tremendous pain and agony. This was the one and only time that he hadn't experienced any pain. Even Meng Lei himself was rather unused to it. The assimilation process lasted about 10 minutes. At the end of the assimilation process, Meng Lei had completely turned into a tree. His hair had turned into dense and lush leaves, his body into a thick and sturdy tree trunk, his arms into tree branches, his legs into tree roots. He was 100 meters tall and boasted lush, luxuriant leaves. He brimmed with vitality and stood tall and straight. The most amazing thing was that Meng Lei was giving off a torrential and surging sense of vitality. All the shelves around them displayed botanical magic materials that had long since withered and dried up, were given a new lease of life. New shoots sprouted from them and began to grow madly as though they had been injected with steroids. 1 meter, 2 meters, 3 meters. Within the short span of a few breaths, a forest had formed around Meng Lei. All sorts of plants grew lushly around him, engulfing Meng Lei, the cause of it all. As such strong life force, Meng Lei could sense the change in his divine body. Not only had his divine body greatly strengthened, but the life force within him had also become more than 100 times stronger. A life force that had become 100 times stronger. Now, this was something extremely astonishing. It meant that Meng Lei's cell viability had become even stronger, so his rate of recovery from injuries had become faster, and he could last even longer in battles now. System. Bring up the stats interface. Host. Meng Lei race. Human, primeval bloodline. Primordial human, 16%. Assimilated bloodlines. God-slaying rat. Divine netherworld phoenix, youth. 100-armed giant. Ancient tree of life, 13%. Wealth. 6.5 million divinity crystals physical body constitution. Metal origin divine body, 1%. Spirit. Intermediate deity. Elementary grade power of divinity. 200 divinity crystals laws of nature. Double elemental fusion. Some increased triple elemental fusion. Wind light dark, 0.1%. Metal wood earth, 0.1%. Earth wood thunder, 0.1%. Metal dark ice, 0.1%. Quadruple elemental fusion. Ice metal dark fire, 0.1%. Meng Lei marveled. The ancient tree of life bloodline's assimilation rate is actually only at 13%? System. How much does it cost to raise the ancient tree of life bloodline assimilation rate? Dear host, Raising the ancient tree of life bloodline by 1% requires 100 million divinity crystals, replied the system coldly. 100 million divinity crystals? That's so expensive. Meng Lei's jaw dropped. Is the ancient tree of life bloodline also an ancient god bloodline? Yes, it is, host. Meng Lei was rather excited. To think it's actually another ancient god bloodline. I've struck gold this time. Both the primordial human bloodline and the ancient tree of life bloodlines were ancient god bloodlines. He had two ancient god bloodlines now. This meant that he now had an additional form of assurance on his road to becoming an ancient god. This was simply wonderful. When Meng Lei got out of his tree form and resumed human form, he noticed at once that thick and lush vegetation had surrounded him. He couldn't help but frown. Then, he sent the plants that had sprouted from the magic materials into the Tower of Time and planted them into the ground with a grand wave. Magic materials that could qualify to be displayed here were all highly valuable and rare materials. Rather than letting them wither, he might as well plant them in the Tower of Time. Meng Lei then continued to check out the other treasures. Ding! Pickup successful. You have obtained the six-winged angel bloodline. Will you assimilate it? Assimilate it? Chapter 296 By Our Lord's Decree, The Secret of Heaven's Vault. Ding! Pickup successful. You have obtained the Light Divine Technique Secret Art. By Our Lord's Decree. Will you assimilate it? By Our Lord's Decree? Meng Lei paused for a while. Although Pope Hayes had been beaten to the ground easily, his divine technique had left a deep impression. A pinnacle-level lesser deity that could cast an intermediate deity-level divine technique, the boost in power was that great. I must check it out. In a split second, a barrage of information surged into his mind. After quite a while, Meng Lei finally finished absorbing the knowledge, and a hint of amazement flashed across his eyes. By Our Lord's Decree, a light elemental divine technique of the angel gods which was several times, even up to dozens of times powerful, that of ordinary light elemental spells. If the ordinary light elemental divine technique was like normal light elemental magic, then the By Our Lord's Decree was like the light elemental dragon language magic. Their power was on a different level. It's good. Meng Lei nodded. With this secret art, my divine techniques will be more dynamic. Ding! Pickup successful. You have obtained the Divine Light Eagle bloodline. Will you assimilate it? The Divine Light Eagle bloodline? Now, what bloodline is it this time? The system did not respond, so Meng Lei could only ask Dodola. Dodola was indeed an all-knowing encyclopedia. The Divine Light Eagle is a light/wind double elemental divine beast, which can become comparable to a lesser deity when it becomes an adult. Only lesser deity level at the adult stage? That divine beast is trash. Don't assimilate. Meng Lei shook his head promptly. After a round of browsing, Meng Lei could not pick up any more decent stuff, and he left the half-plane where the light church treasury was. Oh, Amos, shall we return? Yes, sure. Amos nodded. I have laid out tasks which I believe they will finish successfully, so I'm basically an absentee manager. Nice to hear that. Meng Lei concurred with Amos's course of actions. Subordinates should settle matters like spreading faith. There was no need to personally attend to them. After this, Meng Lei brought Amos back to Heaven's Vault continent and returned to the old Dragon God Empire Palace, which was now the Meng Lei Empire Palace. The palace was almost the same as before. It was just that the current master was Meng Lei instead of the dragons. How people had changed, despite the environment remaining the same. I was here for quite a lot back then, where I had seen the Dragon Emperor and brought the kids of the Fire Dragon Magic Academy here for the empire-wide exchange competition. Amos sighed emotionally and went on. I would never have imagined that the dragons would be chased out of the palace, and humans would take over as master of this empire. You never know what will happen next. Change is the only constant. The wheel of fortune turns. Meng Lei smiled. Things are constantly evolving. How can there be empires that last forever? That's true. Amos nodded. Meng Lei smiled and said, Let's go. Amos, let's hang around in the palace before going back to Dragon Island. All right. Pohaman brought a bunch of people to see Meng Lei as soon as he entered the palace. "Greetings, master." It was nothing to Meng Lei, but Old Amos was frightened as he stared at Pohaman and the rest. Such terrifying divine power. Each of them was stronger than me, similar to the Light Church's Pope. They're all lesser deities? Meng Lei, they're all lesser deities? Old Amos could not help but ask. Yeep, all lesser deities. Meng Lei replied with a smile. Gosh, so many of them. Old Amos gasped. 1, 2, 3, 12. 12 lesser deities. It's unbelievable. As Old Amos was sizing them up, they did the same. They were wondering, who is this old fellow beside Master? Let me introduce you. This is my teacher, Amos Kroc, Meng Lei said calmly. Amos Kroc. Everyone else was puzzled except for Thanil, whose body was shaking. You're Amelin's elder brother? You're... Old Amos looked at Thanil. I'm Thanil, the black dragon half-deity. Thanil had a perplexed face. Amos, weren't you dead? Why, haha, I have 2 lives. Old Amos laughed and said, I see. Thanil nodded his head slightly and understood immediately. Old Amos is the person that I respect the most. I want all of you to treat him like me. Understand? Meng Lei said as he swept a glance across everybody. Yes, master. There's no need for such formalities, Meng Lei. Old Amos was frightened. They're all lesser deities, while I'm not even a true god. How could I possibly ask them to treat me like you? There's nothing improper here. Meng Lei waved his hands with a smile and asked, How is the matter with the migration? There should be a rough plan, right? Master, Pohaman stepped forward. We have discussed, and we agreed to develop the 48 existential planes in the shortest time possible. The best solution is still migrating beast people races that have decent reproduction rates like pigmen, rabbitmen, doghead kobolds, and others before we migrate the rest. Plus, the beast people empire had suffered heavily. And as fear and uncertainty gripped the empire, now is the best opportunity to establish our faith among them. Everyone nodded their heads in agreement. That's a good plan. I'll leave it for you all to settle. Don't disappoint me. Meng Lei raised his head slightly and continued. Once this is settled, it'll be the time to divide and confer existential planes and create a god system. Yes, master. Everyone was excited at the thought of such a historical moment. They would obtain existential planes and construct a god system. By then, they would all become gods under Meng Lei's system, and they would enjoy an endless amount of faith. How great would that be? Did anything happen these few days while I was away? Meng Lei asked. Master, everything is fine in Heaven's Vault continent, Pohaman said while he bowed. The rest nodded slightly too. With so many lesser deities here, it would be difficult for anything troublesome to occur. However, Thanil hesitated a while before he said suddenly, Master, the dragon god had looked for me. Dragon god? Meng Lei raised his eyebrows. What did he want? He wanted me to destroy the teleportation magic circle in the far northern Icelands so he could take over the 48 existential planes that the dark demonic dragon left behind. Still, this isn't the point. Thanil did not dare to hide anything as he continued. The point is, the dragon god told me that he had already reported Heaven's Vault continent's secret to the dragon god race. He said that it was a secret so lucrative to countless higher deities that the dragon gods will definitely send their army down to Heaven's Vault continent. By then, the entire Heaven's Vault continent will be plunged into great misery and suffering. While Master, Heaven's Vault continent's secret? What secret could this continent possibly have? That's right, Heaven's Vault continent is just a low-end material plane. Why would it have any secrets? This bastard dragon god must be sprouting ridiculous, shocking nonsense. One that interests countless higher deities. Everyone shook their head as they scoffed at the idea, but Meng Lei started to frown and slipped into deep thoughts. Heaven's Vault continent's secret? A secret that interests countless higher deities. What secret would that be? Dodola. Is the secret that the dragon god spoke of the Tower of Time? Meng Lei was baffled. Other than the Tower of Time, I can't think of any other possibilities. And of course, we can't strike out that God's demon's continent. But that secret can never be greater than the Tower of Time. However, even these were of absolutely no value to the high and mighty deities, let alone having a secret that could astound a higher deity. The only thing that Meng Lei could think of was the Tower of Time. Not only was the God of Time a great perfection deity that had comprehended and perfectly assimilated 5 types of basic laws, but he was even an ancient god that had comprehended time-based laws of nature. Despite not in possession of chief god divine cores, ancient gods could nevertheless contend against chief gods. What kind of powerful existence must they be, then? And how great and noble must they be? As for the Tower of Time, as a place that stored the God of Time's legacy and treasures, its allure to the deities in the void was self-evident. By obtaining the Tower of Time, they would obtain the ancient god, the God of Time's legacy, his treasures, and even the cultivation method for time-based laws of nature. How alluring was that? It was no exaggeration to say that even chief gods might be tempted, let alone higher deities. Meng Lei said, "If that's really the case, then it's indeed rather troublesome. Never mind, I'm the master of the existential plane. Any deity can forget about behaving so presumptuously here. As the master of the existential plane, he was an absolute and invincible existence while in the existential plane. What was there for him to fear?" "You're oversimplifying things, Meng Lei." Dodola slowly shook its head and said, "I've certainly mentioned in the past that deities of the void are unable to descend upon heaven's vault continent in most typical cases, but nothing is absolute in this world. Could it be that there are other methods aside from secret arts, such as the angel god's immolation and summoning spell?" Meng Lei broke into a slight frown. He wasn't concerned about the angel's immolation spell. Aside from the fact that the immolation spell required extremely demanding conditions in order to be cast, there was also one other most important factor. How powerful the angel summoned through immolation was strongly linked to how powerful the sacrifice themselves were. The more powerful the sacrifice was, the more powerful the summoned angel would be. Even someone as powerful as Pope Hayes, who was a pinnacle-level lesser deity, had only managed to summon Lorenzo, a 6-winged angel on par with an intermediate deity, whereas those weaker than the Pope would only summon angels even weaker than that. Yet, it was impossible to find anyone stronger than the Pope in Heaven's vault continent. Besides, considering how demanding the conditions for immolation were, whether or not anyone was willing to do it was a problem in itself. Therefore, Meng Lei wasn't worried about secret arts like immolation at all. "You're oversimplifying things, Meng Lei." Dodola shook its head and said, "The deities in the void have a multitude of ways at their fingertips if they wish to descend upon a low-end existential plane. Most commonly, they use 2 particular methods." "What methods are they?" asked Meng Lei gravely. "The first is to select, provide guidance, and groom someone," Dodola explained. "The deities in the void would select and provide guidance to a native being from Heaven's vault continent. Within 10,000 years, they'll groom them into a true god, a lesser deity, an intermediate deity, or even a higher deity. You should know that it isn't hard to groom someone into a higher deity. It's nothing more than just a few divine cores and a fusion laws of nature fragment." Meng Lei's expression changed at once. Was grooming someone into a higher deity difficult? Theoretically, it really wasn't. A saint domain could already assimilate divine cores. It required only 1 lesser deity divine core to groom a saint domain into a lesser deity, 5 to groom them into an intermediate deity, and 5 lesser deity divine cores and 1 fusion laws of nature fragment to groom them into a higher deity. Of course, the person would also need to split their divine spirit during this process. Thus, they would need treasures that could enhance their divine spirit. Things like crystallized divine spirit extracts, soul ice marrow, and so on would suffice. Generally speaking, it was indeed very costly to groom someone into a higher deity, but there was definitely no lack of wealthy tycoons among the deities in the void. As long as they were willing to do it, they certainly could groom someone into a higher deity within a short period of time. "Is that really possible?" Meng Lei gasped. For the first time, the deity's wisdom had astonished him. "I told you, as long as the deities in the void are willing to, they have a plethora of ways that they can descend upon a low-end existential plane." Dodola sighed. The second commonly used method is demon metamorphosis. Demon metamorphosis? Meng Lei was taken aback. You should also know that deities in the void cannot descend upon low-end existential planes while demons can. Dodola said gravely, this is a loophole that they can exploit. The deities in the void would split their divine spirit and take over a low-grade or same-grade demon's body, thereby grooming a demonic incarnation of themselves so that they can descend upon low-end existential planes anytime they want. They can do that? Meng Lei gasped. Aren't deities and demons sworn enemies? Are there deities that are willing to take over a demon's body and own a demonic incarnation? What's the big deal about that? Dodola scoffed. I'll be honest with you. Most typical deities with even a bit of background will groom one, several, even demonic incarnation of themselves. There are even those who take it a step further and rear numerous demon servants so that they can use them during times of need. A mocking Dodola said, deities? Demons? How can there be absolute justice in this world? Or absolute evilness? As long as it profits oneself, those sanctimonious deities can bring themselves to do anything. I understand now. Meng Lei nodded slowly. I've underestimated the deities in the void. If the dragon god has really reported the Tower of Time's existence to the colossal dragon gods, we will face extreme peril. Dodola said gravely, the colossal dragon gods are a powerful godly clan that is in no way inferior to the Titan gods and the angel gods. I get it now. Meng Lei nodded slowly. What are your plans? Asked Dodola in a low voice. Become stronger, I suppose. Only when I've become stronger will I be able to handle all the difficulties thrown at me. A smiling Meng Lei said, if all else fails, then I can only bring forward my deification. Nothing can go wrong once I have a higher deity divine incarnation. I can rest assured now that you've said that. Dodola heaved a sigh of relief at Meng Lei's response. Meng Lei had already assimilated quite a few types of laws of nature by now. As long as he wanted to, he could ascend and become a higher deity anytime he wanted. As both a higher deity as well as the master of the existential plane, as long as he didn't run into a great perfection deity, Meng Lei would be an absolute and invincible presence in Heaven's Vault continent. So, there's nothing to really be afraid of. A relaxed Meng Lei said, by the way, didn't you mention the Gods Demons continent just now? Is there a Gods Demons continent on the Heaven's Vault continent existential plane? As the master of the existential plane, you're really so... An exasperated Dodola rolled its eyes. What's the big deal about me being the master of the existential plane? How long has it only been since I became one? How am I supposed to know that there's also a Gods Demons continent on this existential plane when the endless oceans are so vast? Meng Lei snorted and said, you're right though. I indeed haven't done a proper inspection of Heaven's Vault continent existential plane ever since I became its master. I'll take a look right away. The moment the thought occurred to him, Meng Lei released his divine cognition at once. Through the heart of the existential planes, he began to inspect the Heaven's Vault continent existential plane. An intermediate deity's divine cognition could only reach a maximum range of 1 million miles in radius, but with the help of the heart of the existential planes, Meng Lei was able to inspect the whole existential plane. Of course, this also required a certain amount of time. A few minutes later, Meng Lei finally located the third continent, the Gods Demons continent, after going one round around the endless oceans. What the heck? That continent's huge. It's actually even bigger than the light continent. How strange. Why are magical beasts the only creatures there? Where are the humans? The beast people? The titans? Since it's covered in forests, surely there must be at least fairies there? A round of inspection later, Meng Lei found himself disappointed. Instead, magical beasts were the only creatures there, and there was an infinite number of them. The astonishing thing was that these magical beasts were much stronger than those in Heaven's Vault continent and Light continent. Even Saint Domain and half-deity magical beasts lived lives worse than even a dog's there. On top of that, there were almost 100 divine beasts. One must admit that the magical beasts on Gods Demons continent had astounded Meng Lei. There was an astonishing number of Saint Domain magical beasts, innumerable half-deity magical beasts, and even almost 100 divine beasts there. Furthermore, and most importantly, there was even a divine beast that rivaled an intermediate deity there. Now, that was astonishing. Why would an intermediate deity-level divine beast continue to stay on this existential plane? Could it be that it hadn't yet been 10,000 years since it became an intermediate deity? What kind of joke was that? Do you see the gods' demons' continent's fearsomeness for yourself now? Dodola said with a slight smile. Aside from the Tower of Time, the gods' demons' continent is definitely this existential plane's biggest secret. Menglei asked in disbelief. Dodola, what kind of secret does the gods' demons' continent exactly hold? Why are the magical beasts there so strong? Their strength is practically beyond any reason or logic. Why? Because of the two words, gods and demons. Dodola explained. More than 20,000 years ago, innumerable gods and demons suddenly descended upon this existential plane and started a war that swept through the whole continent. Gods and demons descended upon the existential plane? Why? Menglei looked stupefied. I don't know. Dodola shook its head. There were originally also humans and other races on gods' demons' continent, but they all perished in that war between the gods and demons. In the end, only a handful of lucky magical beasts managed to survive. After the war, magical beasts became the biggest beneficiaries of the war. They devoured the gods' and demons' remains and seized their assets and divine cores, resulting in their power receiving a terrifying boost within a short period of time. I see. Realization dawned upon Menglei. Living conditions didn't differ much from continent to continent when everyone was all on the same existential plane. Therefore, it was impossible that such a great difference in strength would happen. As it turned out, it was actually all because of the war between the gods and demons. More than 20,000 years have gone by, but there should still be a great number of gods and demons remains on gods' demons' continent. You can go over and take a look if you're interested. Dodola smiled and said, Who knows? Maybe you'll find some good stuff. Menglei nodded slightly. I'd still have headed over and taken a tour around the gods' demons' continent even if there weren't any gods and demons remains there. This existential plane is my turf, after all. Yeah. Dodola didn't offer any further response after that, and its voice faded away very quickly. Menglei then turned to his subordinates and said, All of you are to speed up the migration process. At the same time, you must also protect the teleportation magic circle in the far northern Icelands. Nothing must go wrong. Yes, master. His subordinates bowed affirmatively. All right, get down to work. Menglei dismissed them with a wave. Then, he began to take a tour around the imperial palace with Ol Amos in tow. Ol Amos had stayed in the imperial palace during the last 2 days. It was only on the third day that he finally left and departed for Dragon Island. Apart from Ol Amos' younger sister Immolation, everyone else on Dragon Island was a human genius. By the Menglei Empire stipulations, Saint Domain experts were allowed to enter Dragon Island, the Divine Titan Temple, and other half-planes where laws of nature were distinct and magic elements were rich to cultivate. Immolation was currently the only dragon on Dragon Island. Thus, the so-called Dragon Island actually only existed in name now. After Ol Amos' departure, Menglei went to God's Demons continent by himself, intending to take a good look around. Located to Heaven's Vault continent's southeast, God's Demons continent was much vaster in territory than Heaven's Vault continent. On top of that, the whole continent was fully covered in forests and undoubtedly boasted the 3 continents' best living environment on the existential plane. Menglei floated in the air above God's Demons continent. His divine cognition spread into the surroundings like tidal waves, shrouding the whole continent within as he began to inspect it properly. Menglei made a discovery after a mere minute of inspection. There's something out of the norm over there. Menglei came to the area above a basin. The basin was as though a gigantic bowl embedded in an endless sea of forests. Lush and luxuriant vegetation filled the basin, the woods inside even denser and lusher than those outside. Additionally, several lesser deity-level divine beasts had also occupied the basin's central region. The magic elements in the basin are far richer than those in the outside world. In particular, the magic elements in the central region are even as dense as solids. It must be because of that thing in the underground. Meng Lei's eyes gleamed as he made a grabbing motion in the air. A huge intangible claw flew out of nowhere and grabbed at the basin's central region, passing right through the ground upon contact. It went 60,000 meters underground before finally coming to a stop. Then it grabbed forcefully at it. Boom! Amid a great explosion, the ground within 5 kilometers of the area began to shake violently as though an earthquake had broken out. Then, it started to rise into the air slowly. 1 meter, 2 meters, 3 meters. Earth and soil were tossed everywhere as trees and branches snapped and broke. What's going on? The huge commotion alarmed the magical beasts in the basin. The 4 lesser deity-level divine beasts, in particular, even took to the sky and began to inspect the area, upon which they noticed the basin's central region that had risen into the air, as well as the culprit of all these, Meng Lei. The 4 divine beasts flew into a thundering fury at once. The basin was their den, but Meng Lei was actually making trouble there. Wasn't this tantamount to bearding the lion in its den? He was going too far. There were some things that one could tolerate and some things that one couldn't. You lowly worm, how dare you act so presumptuously here? D. The 4 divine beasts were respectively the 5-colored sacred bull, the moon-howling heavenly wolf, the rainbow-wood toad, and the great earth bear. Despite not having transformed into their true forms, they stood at 1,000 feet tall. Terrifying divine power spread into the surroundings, crushing down on all areas around them and sweeping through heaven and earth. All the magical beasts in the basin prostrated on the ground in fear, frightened to the extreme as they shook like leaves. They simply couldn't understand, why had the 4 great kings suddenly gone into a rage for no reason? D. For attacks. A 5-colored deluge, countless wind blades, wooden vines that looked like poisonous snakes, and thundering sound waves, imbued with surging power of divinity, swept brazenly toward Meng Lei. They moved with fierce momentum and blotted out the sky. As though great mountains crushing down on someone, they were capable of destroying everything. The corners of Meng Lei's lips curled upward in response. He reached out a finger, tapped the air, and commanded, "Freeze!" Buzz. A mysterious wave of energy spread outward, instantly locking down the air within 100 miles of where they were. The fearsome attacks also froze in midair and became still and motionless. Disperse! The 4 attacks dispersed with a loud boom upon command, turning into countless glowing particles that dissipated in the air. What? How can this be? Damn it! He's neutralized our attacks so easily? The 4 divine beasts were flabbergasted. One must know that they were lesser deity-level divine beasts. Although those attacks had been launched casually and without much thought, they weren't attacks that one could easily just neutralize. Who exactly is he? I don't know who he is. Never seen him before. Not sure. Just as alarm and doubt filled the 4 divine beasts. For green vines grew rapidly from Meng Lei and turned into poisonous snakes that shot toward the divine beasts. It's coming. Not daring to be careless, the 4 divine beasts were about to counterattack right away when something that shocked and horrified them happened. Their bodies, they couldn't move. Damn it! What exactly is going on? Damn! Move! Hurry, MOV! Blood drained from the 4 divine beasts' faces. They struggled fiercely and tried to move, but it was all in vain. They simply couldn't move no matter what they did. Misbehaving? I'll put a leash on you then. For vines shot toward them at lightning-quick speed, winding around the divine beasts' necks along with the momentum and restricting them. However, Meng Lei did not pay any more attention to them. He treated them like air and focused on capturing the monster beneath the earth. The earth rumbled as mountain rocks rolled down. The earth shook vigorously as a humongous being was dragged out of the ground. It was completely soaked in mud, making it difficult to decipher its appearance. A forceful divine power spread into the surroundings the moment it appeared. The 4 restless divine beasts looked toward the gigantic creature. What's that? What fearsome divine power? Out from the underground? Meng Lei swung his arm casually, and the mud on the gigantic creature flew off. Moments later, a majestic creature was revealed. It had a body of a gigantic ape, hippopotamus-like mouth, steel needle-like golden fur all over, and thick muscles bulging like boulders. Every part of its body was filled with explosive power. Golden behemoth. It only took a glance for the 4 divine beasts to recognize this massive creature. What they were more surprised about was that there was a golden behemoth underground which they were completely unaware of. An intermediate deity golden behemoth. Meng Lei nodded secretly. Even after 20,000 years, this golden behemoth's corpse was still vivid without any signs of decomposition. Such was a body of an intermediate deity, almost incorruptible. However, a black spear was stuck at the forehead of this golden behemoth. This must have killed it. This spear is very familiar. Meng Lei took out his god-slaying spear and compared them. He realized that they looked exactly the same. Both were surrounded by lightning and nothing different. Another god-slaying spear. Meng Lei's expression became awful. The one that killed this golden behemoth was the same as the one that killed Amos previously. Damn it! Just who was it? Meng Lei immediately tried dripping his blood to claim ownership and did not face any obstruction. It was clear that the owner of this spear was already dead. My dear Amos, you can't even find this guy to take your revenge on anymore. That is simply tragic. Meng Lei kept both god-slaying spears and brought the corpse into the Tower of Time. This corpse was an invaluable treasure. As for the 4 of you, Meng Lei looked at the 4 divine beasts and could not help but think that they seemed pretty magnificent. The 5-colored sacred bull, moon-howling heavenly wolf, rainbow-wood toad, great earth bear looked majestic and extraordinary. The heavens are virtuous and cherish all life, so I shall not kill you all, Meng Lei said casually. But your punishment is to hand over your divine spirit origin energy to avoid death. What are you talking about? You want us to submit to you? Forget about it. Dream on. You're bullying too much. The 4 divine beasts were enraged upon hearing Meng Lei's words as they glared at Meng Lei with their eyes spewing with fury. They felt violated. Unwilling? Then I guess there's no other way. Meng Lei shook his head. I have given all of you a chance. Since you're not willing to take it, then don't blame me for anything. Splurt, 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 splurt. Countless tiny needles sticking out of the vines penetrated the 4 divine beasts, poking through their necks and absorbing their life essence violently. Life drawing. The ability to absorb others' vitality for his own use and enrich his life essence. This was not an innate special ability but an ability of the ancient tree of life. Gurgle. Damn it! Get off me! Let go! As they felt their life being drained away endlessly, the 4 divine beasts started to struggle madly. However, under the might of the power of existential plane, any struggles would be futile. They could only watch their bodies shrink like a burst balloon. Their energy was drained quickly, and there was nothing they could do about it. At this rate, we'll be sucked into dry corpses and die in his hands. Quickly, summon our great God. Only he can save us. Yes, yes, yes. Summon our great God. The 4 divine beasts wanted to let out roars, but they could not even open their mouths, let alone calling for their great God. It's all over. We're dead meat. No, I don't want to die. I have just become a divine beast. I don't want to die yet. As death loomed, the moon-howling heavenly wolf was the first to yield as it repeatedly begged, Spare me. I submit. I submit. Meng Lei snorted. He stopped draining the moon-howling heavenly wolf's life essence reluctantly, and he calmly said, Yielding just like that? What a wussy. Hull. The moon-howling heavenly wolf cried out and released its divine spirit origin energy obediently, letting Meng Lei refine it and control its life and death. Good that you know your place. Meng Lei let the wolf off. Thank you. The moon-howling heavenly wolf looked at Meng Lei with a complicated gaze. It would never have thought that it was a mighty king of the heavenly wolves moments ago. At the very next moment, he actually submitted to some random fellow it did not know at all. It was unimaginable. What about the 3 of you? Meng Lei glanced at the five-colored sacred bull, rainbow-wood toad, and great earth bear. We submit too. As much as they were unwilling to submit to Meng Lei, their lives were in jeopardy. Thus, the three divine beasts finally yielded and gave up their divine spirit origin energy. Let's go then. Meng Lei turned around and flew away. The four divine beasts did not dare to delay and followed docilely. Half an hour later, Meng Lei came to the sky above a lake. The waters were clear and sparkling with ripples along the surface, like a beautiful emerald embedded among the sea of the lush forest. The surroundings were filled with thick bushes and verdant trees. It was picturesque. This is a nice place. Meng Lei was a little unwilling to destroy such a scenic place, but there's something in the lake that he must obtain. A few moments later, a trident emerged from the waters. This trident was 100 meters long. It was made entirely out of an unknown material, and it emitted surging water elemental energy waves with incredible divine power. Meng Lei flicked his fingers for a drop of blood. Surprisingly, he could not refine this trident. Meng Lei was stunned. Did someone own the trident? His divine cognition entered the trident promptly and shattered the previous owner's divine spirit mark, and he engraved his own. Impressive. It is a high-tier divine weapon. I've reeled in the big one this time. After refining the trident and knowing the level of this divine weapon, Meng Lei was truly surprised. High-tier divine weapons were extremely rare. Meng Lei was lucky enough to possess divine weapons like the Grim Reaper Scythe and the God-slaying Spear, but his Grim Reaper Scythe was the only high-tier divine weapon he had. It proved the rarity of such weapons. Now that he obtained this trident, it was an absolute windfall. Roar! At that moment, the lake surged and churned violently as a gigantic jade-green winged hydra emerged from the water. It opened its huge mouth and went straight at Meng Lei. An atrocious stench invaded his nostrils, and Meng Lei almost threw up his dinner from last night. What the hell? The lake was the sky-blue black-winged snake's private paradise where it could do whatever it wanted. It looked for food whenever it was hungry, intertwined itself around the trident at the bottom of the lake, and slept when it was full. It lived a leisurely and contented, comfortable, and carefree life. Yet on this day, just as the sky-blue black-winged snake was sleeping lazily as per usual, the trident underneath it had suddenly vanished into thin air. The sky-blue black-winged snake woke up with a start. Then, it spotted Meng Lei, who was suspended above the lake, and flew into a rage. How dare he? Not only had he trespassed its den, but he had even stolen its divine weapon. That was too much of him. The sky-blue black-winged snake promptly charged out of Lake Sky-Blue, its cavernous jaws snapping at Meng Lei and the pungent stench coming from it, almost killing him. Get lost! Meng Lei dealt a palm strike from mid-air. Boom! The sky-blue black-winged snake was thrown back. With a flap of its wings, it then lunged at Meng Lei again. It opened its mouth and sprayed a blast of highly toxic green breath at him. Absolute zero! Meng Lei pointed at it, instantly freezing the blast of green breath, which subsequently broke into ice chips. A vine appeared in Meng Lei's hand and turned into a steel whip that Meng Lei used to lash mercilessly at the snake. Smack! Unable to dodge in time, the steel whip struck squarely against the sky-blue black-winged snake. At once, its skin and flesh split open, and a deep bloody wound formed. Smack! 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 Whip after images filled the sky and engulfed the sky-blue black-winged snake like a violent storm. It was completely rendered a punching bag. The lashings from the whip echoed loudly whenever it landed and covered it in bloody wounds. Damn it! Intense pain caused the sky-blue black-winged snake to wake up fully. Fear and alarm filled it at once. Aware that it was no match for its opponent, it hastily flapped its wings and flew toward Lake Sky-Blue. Should the whip flog it any further, it would surely be turned into minced meat. Thinking of fleeing? Meng Lei snorted. Absolute zero. Crack! A thick, solid layer of ice instantly formed on Lake Sky-Blue's surface. As if it had crashed against a bronze or iron wall, the crash against the ice made the sky-blue black-winged snake dazed and dizzy and caused it to see stars. Die, damned beast! Meng Lei tossed the trident out casually. The trident turned into a stream of light that instantly pierced through the sky-blue black-winged snake's head, pinning it securely onto the lake's frozen surface. Is it dead? Blackwing died? Just like that? Gasp! The four divine beasts that had come along had witnessed the whole process of Meng Lei slaying the sky-blue black-winged snake. They couldn't help but gasp at the sight. The sky-blue black-winged snake was also a lesser deity like them, and was in no way any weaker than them. Yet how had the battle turned out? Meng Lei had killed it in no time at all. Had they not submitted to him just now, would they have also ended up like that? An icy chill couldn't help but well up in their hearts the moment they thought of that. It's not your fault for having bad breath, but it's not right if you come here and disgust others. Meng Lei casually retracted the trident and flung away the blood on it. Then, after gouging out the sky-blue black-winged snake's divine core, he tossed its carcass to the four divine beasts. This carcass is yours. Thank you, master. Meng Lei continued to tour around leisurely after that. As the master of the existential plane, nothing about the gods-demons continent could escape him once he made up his mind to search through it. Ranging from as tiny as a worm to as large as a mountain, everything in the sky, on the ground, and in the water was revealed to him with nowhere to hide. Every god or demon remains, every broken fragment from divine weapons, every god or demon's dead body. Meng Lei dug them out one after another and accumulated an extremely astonishing amount of rewards. After touring half the gods-demons continent, Meng Lei had harvested a total of 38 lesser deity divine cores, 17 whole and intact divine weapons, and 24 whole and intact god or demon's dead bodies. As for broken or damaged ones, there were even more of them. Of course, all the places where god or demon remains and divine weapons could be found were typically also occupied by divine beasts. Meng Lei killed or subdued them as he deemed necessary. By the time he went full circle, he had gained another 24 subordinates. Including the four divine beasts from earlier, he now had a very strong and powerful lineup of 28 divine beast subordinates in total. At last, Meng Lei came up to a steep cliff that rose as high as hundreds of thousands of feet into the sky. A 10,000 meters wide waterfall cascaded from the top of the cliff like the Milky Way and formed a gigantic pool at the bottom. In mist rose from the pool as water splashed about. The cliff, the precipice, the waterfall, the pool. They came together to form a grand and spectacular sight. While the sight was indeed grand and spectacular, it nevertheless didn't count as much in God's Demons continent. There were tons of other grander and more magnificent-looking places there. Yet, all 28 of his divine beast subordinates started to shake in their boots upon reaching the place. They looked awfully fearful and horror-stricken, as though there was a ferocious primeval beast in the pool. Meng Lei knew what they were afraid of, the one and only intermediate deity-level divine beast in God's Demons continent that had occupied the bottom of the pool. This place was its den. From his subordinates, Meng Lei had learned that the intermediate deity-level divine beast was referred to as the magical beast god and that all the magical beasts on the continent worshipped it. Don't worry. The magical beast god whom you worship will become just like you in no time. Meng Lei gave them a slight smile. Who's going to summon it? This? All 28 divine beasts shuddered and lowered their heads in tandem. Summon the great magical beast god? What kind of joke was that? They would prefer not to die so soon. A bunch of cowards. Meng Lei shook his head. Then, he turned to the deep pool and said, Your Holiness, since you've already discovered us, why don't you show yourself? Splash. The surface of the deep pool began to bubble, and then a huge head emerged from within. It was an enormous snakehead covered in golden dragon scales as though made out of gold. Its violet snake eyes emanated a boundless sense of dignity and stateliness. Boom! In the instant that the golden snakehead appeared, a fearsome pressure that could pierce through the heavens and earth spread outward, instantly weighing down upon everyone present. Meng Lei was naturally unaffected, but his 28 divine beast subordinates were unable to bear it, however. Fear and horror filled their countenances, and they almost instinctively prostrated on the ground in submission. I see that you're a human. Which continent, Heaven's Vault continent or Light continent, have you come from? The magical beast god watched Meng Lei with its snake eyes and inquired dispassionately of him. As for the 28 prostrating divine beasts, it didn't spare them even a glance. You actually know of those 2 continents? Meng Lei raised an eyebrow. Since you know of them, why haven't you occupied them? Surely it's not difficult for you, considering your strength. Occupying other continents holds no meaning to me. The magical beast god shook its head slightly. It's sufficient as long as I have enough power of faith. Enough power of faith? Is the power of faith generated by God's Demon's continent alone really enough? Meng Lei scanned God's Demon's continent and added, "You're an intermediate deity, after all." The magical beast god didn't answer him. Instead, it gave him an eviction order. It said, "Human deity, you may leave now." Leave? Why should I leave? Meng Lei's lips corners quirked upward. Human. I've already shown you great civility by not attacking right away despite your trespass on my territory. The magical beast god glowered at him, an icy glint flashing across its snake eyes as it ordered, "Leave at once!" "Ha! And if I don't?"